Hello and a warm welcome to yet another episode on the Mission Shunya podcast. Hope you're doing well. And if you are among the 80% of the audience in the Northern Hemisphere, hope you are enjoying your summer. Summers are usually associated with breaks and to an extent reflections. So this episode will probably be in sync with your summer mood. Of course, every episode I produce, the big intent is to make it relevant for a long period. Even if it is about an immediate event, I ensure I leave behind some content that any new listener who picks it up a few years down the line feels relevant. Well, I am not actually driving you into a theme for this episode like I generally do, but this episode has a short background. I feel really good to connect with all the guests and the audience through this platform. And like it usually happens in life, you tend to grow your relationship with people over a period of time. If I were to name the guest and share the stories, it could be an episode in itself. So I'll just pick two of them for today. First, Gabriel. I missed crediting Gabriel for introducing me to Juan Hernandez from Break Free from Plastics in the previous episode. The reason I was reminded of it was because of another good introduction that he made recently. Second is Jacob Cherian, another former guest who is a big supporter of the show, and in fact he had some good feedback for the show recently. One of them was how I could piece together short nuggets from the 80 plus episodes into a theme that is general and broad in a way so that even people outside the sustainability space can feel a connect. So well, that's the genesis of this episode. We all know that it takes one small moment of inspiration where we do something that makes us really happy for a long time. In fact, those moments are the ones that defines entrepreneurs or anyone who does something that they are really passionate about. Every episode when I interview a guest, I make sure I get to the origin story of their venture or their passion project, which is definitely a motivating factor. So this episode is all about the start of the entrepreneurial journey or their passion and work. And talking of which, what better place than to hear from the conversation about Jacob and how he got started in this space and how can we contribute in a small way.
Yeah, so living low impact lives on a hillside, we saw that no matter how much of reusable cloth bags and reusable bottles and composting we used, we had to take extra effort to fix, for instance, trash lying around in the forest. Right? It wasn't a sustainable activity. It felt like we were doing a lot more than sustainability by cleaning up that forest. That's where it started. And so people started describing me as the sustainability guy, but I realized that I was always a sustainability guy. Always used reusable bags, always used reusable bottles, and all these small things that individuals do. Use public transport where we can, but I had to look for a word that said something larger when we go beyond just sustainability. And that's where I came across the word regenerative. It's quite common in farming. You hear it in architecture. And as I started deep diving into this idea of being regenerative, which is positive impact, I saw that a whole lifestyle and possibly a business can be built around this idea. Think about how you can give 1 hour back to the larger collective good, to the commons, beyond the self, just 1 hour per week. That's just one episode of Game of Thrones or 2 episodes of some comedy sitcom. So just think about 1 hour per week that you can give back to them. That's really all I want to leave you on.
Well, in fact, part of the 1 hour per week time from Jacob goes into the creation of the Mission Shunya artworks. Thanks to Jacob and his team from Terra Generation for their support. You should definitely check them at terrageneration.com. The second guest is Professor Chaitan Singh Solanki. A globally recognized leader in solar energy, he has undertaken multiple projects trying to put the scale factor in projects. But he started with the idea of a solar lamp. Here's Professor Solanki explaining his motivation to get started, And you will also hear Professor Solanki drawing inspiration from Mahatma Gandhi to inspire the youth of today.
So I thought, with the advancement of solar cell technology, there is no reason why we shouldn't replace every kerosene lamp with a solar lamp. And why it is not being done, I could figure out that it is because the lamps are not affordable, it is because the lamps are not repairable, and it is because the lamps are not available whenever required. So this problem of affordability, repairability, and availability, I believe, is a major problem, not only with the solar lamp, but any other solar product that we are going to implement. And therefore, involvement of local community is very important. And that is how the whole idea came, that solar technology in general is not a rocket science. Whether it is a solar lamp or solar street light or water pump, with a little training, you can actually empower local communities to take care of all their operations. And therefore, I started doing experiment with that idea of involvement of local community, and slowly it grew and grew, and now we have reached already to 6.3 million household through the program. Around the same time, there was a report from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, talking about global warming of 1.5 degrees centigrade, and how what are the efforts should be taken to stop the global warming at that level. When I went through the report, it was quite a serious thing, and because stopping at 1.5 requires tremendous efforts, including the whole world becoming net carbon zero by 2050, which means the whole world mostly should not use any form of carbon. So we should stop using coal, oil, gas, LPG, CNG. So that was another dimension, and I could see that nobody is capable of or even thinking so seriously about this. So the whole idea of Gandhi Global Solar Yatra was that uh, after the successful event of the 2nd October, after the Souls project success, after the IPCC report that came in picture, also India had this headquarter of International Solar Alliance. So when I thought that this many things, that how do we involve young minds all over the world in this particular operation of learning to make their own solar lamp? Why should we do that? Because I keep saying that I am at age 45 right now, and anybody who is in 40s and 50s will go away from the planet another 40, 50 years, but the child is going to stay back, and therefore his and her life is going to affected more due to the climate change than you and my life. And therefore they should be important stakeholder of the energy future on the planet. Also, like today every child can play with the mobile phone, we need to create a kind of system or scenario in which every child should be able to play with the solar energy if you want really solar energy to be part of life. And that's why and the Gandhian principle of non-violence, Gandhian principle of not the mass production but production by masses. Gandhi also told that the world has enough to satisfy everyone's need but not the greed. So his ideals are also global in the sense, and therefore I thought on this very special occasion of 150th birth anniversary, this event should take place at a global level, and we should bring millions and millions of students on board.
Since the time he appeared on the show, Professor Solanki has gone on to lead the Energy Swaraj Yatra running up to 2030, where he is traveling around India in a bus. You should definitely follow the Solar Man of India's Yatra on social media and see if you can meet him in this journey. The third and fourth stories are about real life problems inspiring people to take action. Karthik Ganesan shares his belief on why air pollution is a great leveler and how air pollution got his attention to begin with.
Delhi was called this gas chamber, back in 2015, right? And by the Supreme Court, right? It's not the average person calling it. But over the years, air pollution is a problem that impacts every one of us. And as a researcher who was at that point in time focusing on power energy sector broadly, right, my continued survival in the city of Delhi depended on me understanding and being able to help solve this problem, because otherwise it becomes a hassle for you on a daily basis. So that's really how I think I got into the business of working on air pollution, and slowly then we've built up a team as well. And now our work straddles, not just Delhi's air pollution. I think we're interested in addressing air pollution pan India in many parts of the country. And finally, I think the most important part of I think the work that we do is how do you ensure that air pollution becomes everybody's problem, right? Air pollution is not a problem for the rich, it's not a problem for the poor. Unlike clean water, where you can just purify the water that you're drinking through an RO machine that is installed in your house, you cannot purify the air that you're breathing every minute, every hour. Unless you were to contain yourself to a room that is connected up to the best in class air purifier. Air quality is the great leveler. That's the one thing that a poor person also needs as much as a rich person does. And a rich person can't really do too much to ensure that he's completely protected from it. You spend 16 hours a day outside your home. So given that, we need to ensure that the poor person and the rich person are both equally aware of what the impacts of this are. And at the end of the day, they need to understand that each one of them is a cause for the poor air quality that is around us.
While Karthik looks at air pollution from a policy level, Ayush Jain, who should have been fighting for access to pollution-free cities in the courts, took the entrepreneurial route to tackle the problem. Here's a bit from his personal story and his particular light bulb moment when he made the jump into entrepreneurship.
So I'm from Bhilai, that's in central India. It's a fairly green place, a lot of trees around. So we never really had air pollution as a problem. And my father's also born there, and he had to move to Delhi. He got a promotion and he moved to Delhi in the corporate office. When he did in 2016, there was a massive smog hit weeks, actually, not just days in NCR. That was probably the first time media really took air pollution seriously. And unfortunately for us, my father was there. And we've been, as a family, we've been, very focused on, doing yoga and working out, etc. And my father continued that habit. And he went out to, do some workout in the morning, and he got really sick. In fact, he was admitted in the hospital for 4 days. So, we got worried. We spoke to the doctors, and they said it's because of bad air. He had very bad chest ache. He had wheezing. So it was just not a good situation to be in. There's never really a light bulb sort of a moment when you're starting up. I just knew that the problem is huge and it has a massive scale. Literally, millions of people are dying worldwide because of bad air quality. The number of patients, asthma patients, have risen. The sale of asthma medication has risen by 400% in the last 5 years. So those were staggering numbers. They were strong enough for me to take the plunge. I left my job and started researching on this. What can we do? How can we solve this problem? So like I said, I really didn't know what we were going to do. I had an idea, I had a hunch that let's purify air using ACs, and we should always measure air quality. Otherwise, we don't really know. Otherwise, we're just doing guesswork, and we're doing guesswork with healthcare. That just didn't add up to me. I think it should always be measurable and it should be affordable. So these were the basic guidelines, the basic idea that we have to work on.
On the podcast, we also covered people for whom a passion towards sustainability came naturally, which they in turn used to be an evangelist in the space, and in turn help more people and businesses undergo a sustainability transformation. And one such guest was Neil Matthews. Here's a portion from a conversation where Neil shares what real sustainability transformation is all about and how he tries to be different from the other so-called sustainability champions.
Basically, I used to think telling about sustainability or spreading a message in the internet, email, and in the friendly talks, even speeches, that's all very easy, actually. The biggest thing is practicing it. So, if you look at ourselves consciously, I think the very first thing is taming ourselves is very difficult. Then telling our wife or husband and children that immediate family members and converting them. I think after that it will happen automatically. But what people try to do is by talking and messaging and writing, speaking, we are trying to make everybody follow, which doesn't happen. I learned this at a quite young age, so I believe in converting individual, the me first, and showing as a model.
Well, you should definitely listen to the interview with Neil, and not just that, but all the episode of the guests who were featured today. Well, in fact, if you have some time, just play Mission Shunya in a loop and you will never regret it. Before I wrap up, one story from a recent episode is definitely worth listening to again. We have seen global movement led by young climate activists across the world, but little did we know that such climate activism has definitely led to more transformation. Well, Tristan from Climate Partner shares a candid story of how his business saw an increased traction in recent years, all thanks to the global climate movement. So yes, every small action counts. Well, in this case, Greta and other activists who got on streets have definitely had a big impact globally. So let's listen in.
A lot of companies didn't want to really take climate action for a long time. They didn't think it was a necessary topic, and there's two things that kind of triggered a change here, especially in the European market. So in 2018, I don't know if how much you actually got the sense of this in India, but maybe you've heard of Greta Thunberg.
Yes.
Which is a 16-year-old Swedish girl. You've heard. I'm sure you have.
I'm sure it's a big sensation all over the world.
Yes. And that, I mean, we really felt this in Germany, that this 16-year-old girl hit the streets and started going on strike and protesting that nobody's taking climate action, and hundreds of thousands of children in Germany followed and took to the streets. And that was when it changed for us. That was in 2018 when she started. It completely changed the business because it brought this awareness to everybody because of the children taking to the streets. It went into the media. Investors were getting more serious about it. And now actually companies are taking it really seriously. And now they want to know what to do. And that's when our business started to really explode. So now we're in a phase of real massive scaling. We were, let's say, at the beginning of last year, we were around 50 people. Now we're hitting 250.
Wonderful.
So it's still for large consulting companies or so, it's still small, but it's for us, of course, a huge growth rate that we're allowed to go through. We have to show that we can scale this. And I have a nice little story for you to show how it feels a little bit, or what the difference was.
Yes.
I remember about, what was it? I think 5 years ago, I was invited to a trade fair, and I was supposed to hold a speech there about taking climate action for businesses, right? And it's a trade fair in London, and I went there, and you won't believe it, Girish, there were 4 people there that came to see it. And the one person was the camera person, the other person was the organizer, and the 2 other people were 2 tourists that wanted to rest their feet. So you see, there was no interest whatsoever, but I pulled it through anyway, and I said, okay, I since I'm here, I'll hold the speech. Maybe somebody hears something. And in 2019, that was like a year after Greta hit the streets with her Fridays for Future movement. I was invited by a friend of mine who hosts one of the largest e-commerce conferences in Europe, and the whole conference was, I think, around 3,000 people.
Okay.
And he said, why don't you hold a speech here? You get a whole hour, you get a master class, and you get a room for 50 people. And you could tell them about how to take climate action. And I said, oh gosh, what if the same thing happens again, and 4 people turn up? And it didn't, because they closed the doors after 70 people were inside, and it's like nothing else goes. You have to stay out the rest. So all of a sudden the room was filled with 70 people. So 20 more than were allowed. And I held the speech and everybody was listening and then everybody's interested. I said, wow, this is a real game changer. And at the end, a guy, he put up his hand and says, Tristan, do you know why I'm here? I want to share this with everybody. And I said, okay, please do. I would be really interested to know. And in the room, those 70 people were all really management board people and entrepreneurs, so real decision makers, right? And he said, well, I was sitting at the dinner table last week on Thursday, amongst others, with my 13-year-old daughter, and she said, Daddy, I'm going on strike tomorrow. Just to, and I said, young lady, no, you're going to school, you're not going on strike. And then this 13-year-old girl got up and told her daddy off for a half an hour straight. And then her daddy said, well, okay, you convinced me. You go on strike, and I'll go listen to that speech from Climate Partner next week. And that's when I realized it's who was sitting in the room. It was parents. The room was full of parents.
The right audience.
Yes. And so, Girish, really the children really changed the world here for taking climate action. And so that's a really nice thing to see and to hear, but it also, for me, changed our business dramatically.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. So yes, every small action counts in the global net zero transition. And even listening to this podcast and sharing such stories among your network is a big first step. So signing off on that note, this is Girish Shivakumar, and as always, thank you for listening.